I stood in the driveway while my husband threw my life out of the upstairs window. My work bag hit the concrete first. The metal clasp snapped open, scattering pens, receipts, and client folders across the lawn. My shoes followed, then 3 dresses still hanging from their wooden hangers. One caught on the rose bush we had planted together during our first spring in the house. Then Ethan threw our wedding photograph. The silver frame struck the edge of the driveway and shattered. Our smiling faces remained visible beneath the broken glass. "Get out!" he shouted from the window. "You disgust me, Claire. Don't ever come back." My name is Claire Bennett. I was 32 years old, and until that afternoon, I had believed I was in a stable 6-year marriage. Ethan's face was red with rage. His eyes held a kind of hatred I had never seen directed at me, not even during our worst arguments. That morning, we had shared coffee at the kitchen counter and laughed about the neighbor's dog digging up our flower bed. By sunset, I had apparently become a liar, an adulterer, and a woman he claimed he no longer felt safe around. Standing several feet behind him was Vanessa Cole, our next-door neighbor. She rested one hand against the window frame and kept the other near Ethan's shoulder, close enough to comfort him, without making the gesture look intimate. She wore a pale sweater I had seen her wearing in our kitchen 2 weeks earlier. Vanessa said nothing. When our eyes met, her lips curved into a restrained smile. It was the same expression she had given me the previous week when I asked her to stop entering our house while I was at work. Not an embarrassed smile, not an apologetic one. It was the smile of someone watching the final stage of a plan unfold exactly as expected. "Ethan, listen to me," I called. "Whatever she showed you isn't real." Vanessa leaned closer and whispered something into his ear. His expression hardened. "You're still lying. I haven't even seen what she gave you." "You know exactly what I saw." He disappeared from the window and came back holding my phone. "Ethan, don't!" He let it fall. It landed screen first in the wet grass beside the driveway, surviving the impact far better than our wedding photograph. "I trusted you," he said, his voice breaking. "You and that man made me look like an idiot." That man. I had no idea who he was talking about. Around me, my belongings lay scattered across the lawn as porch lights flickered on and curtains shifted across the street. Neighbors were watching, but no one stepped outside. Behind Ethan, Vanessa stood quietly at his shoulder, looking as though she already belonged in my place. That was the moment I stopped believing this was a misunderstanding. Someone had spent weeks, maybe months, building a story that left Ethan prepared to reject every explanation I could possibly give. Ethan and I had been married for 6 years. Like every couple, we argued about money, chores, and holidays, but we also shared the small routines that made a marriage feel steady. 2 years earlier, we bought the house on Cedar Lane. It had belonged to my grandmother, and I used my inheritance to buy my aunt's remaining share before Ethan and I renovated it together. Legally, the house was mine, but I had always thought of it as ours. Everything changed 9 months before that afternoon, when Vanessa Cole moved in next door. She introduced herself within minutes of arriving, explaining that her husband had left her for a younger woman and that she was trying to rebuild her life. I felt sorry for her, invited her to dinner that weekend, and quickly understood why people trusted her so easily. She was warm, attentive, remembered little details, and had a talent for making vulnerability feel genuine. At first, she asked for harmless favors and returned them with homemade soup, borrowed tools, or offers to collect our packages. Then she started visiting while I was at work. Ethan mentioned it casually enough that I never questioned it until the day I came home early and found her barefoot in my kitchen, drinking coffee from my favorite mug while Ethan fixed a pipe beneath the sink. "You're lucky, Claire," she said with a smile. "He always knows how to take care of things." The compliment lingered just a little too long. Soon after, she began calling him E, a nickname no one but me had ever used. When I asked her to stop, she smiled politely. "I'd never want you to feel threatened." I had never used that word. That evening, Ethan told me I'd embarrassed her. "She's lonely," he said. "You know what her ex put her through." "I only know what she says happened." He frowned. "You're reading too much into this." Over the following weeks, Vanessa quietly inserted herself into our lives. She appeared whenever Ethan was outside, joined our walks by coincidence, and started texting him directly instead of using the neighborhood group chat. Then, during a backyard barbecue, she raised her wine glass and joked, "Ethan, if you ever get tired of being married, remember I only live 20 feet away." Yeah. Everyone laughed. Ethan laughed too. I didn't. Later that night, I told him she'd crossed a line. She was joking. "She keeps testing how much she can say in front of me. You sound jealous." "I sound uncomfortable." He sighed. "Vanessa has been through enough. Could you try being compassionate instead of assuming the worst?" The accusation stayed with me. Ethan had turned my discomfort into evidence of a flaw in my character, while Vanessa's behavior became something I was expected to tolerate because she had suffered. 3 nights later, I came home through the side driveway and saw her standing near the narrow path between our houses, just beyond the reach of the porch lights. She wasn't heading home or walking toward our door. Instead, she stood beside the living room window, hidden behind the cedar hedge, watching through the glass, while Ethan slept on the couch with the television still playing. I slammed my car door. Vanessa turned, met my eyes without the slightest hint of surprise, gave me a slow wave, smiled, and calmly walked back inside her house. I watched her disappear through the front door, realizing I had misunderstood her all along. She wasn't just a lonely neighbor enjoying my husband's attention. She was studying us. I didn't know it then, but she had already begun building the lie that would eventually drive me out of my own marriage. 2 weeks later, Ethan began changing. At first, the differences were subtle. He guarded his phone, ended conversations the moment I entered a room, and watched me with quiet suspicion. Whenever I asked what was wrong, he gave the same answer. Nothing, I'm just tired. I wanted to believe him because exhaustion was ordinary. Suspicion wasn't. Then, one Thursday evening, I came home to find him sitting alone at the dining table beneath a single lamp. My untouched dinner still sat on the counter. You didn't eat? I wasn't hungry. I set down my bag. What happened? Instead of answering, he rubbed his thumb across his phone. Where were you tonight? At the office. Until almost 9? We had a client deadline. I told you this morning. He nodded slowly. Were you there the whole time? I frowned. What exactly are you asking? He finally looked at me. Vanessa saw you meeting someone. For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. She saw your car outside a cafe near Grant Park on Tuesday, he continued. She watched you get out with another man. I was at work. She says otherwise. She was wrong. With a man. I don't even know who you're talking about. She thought I deserved to know. That was when everything became clear. Vanessa hadn't presented herself as the woman trying to destroy our marriage. She had made herself the reluctant witness, reluctantly delivering a truth she claimed she wished she'd never seen. What else did she tell you? That she's noticed your car there more than once, usually on Thursday nights. A chill ran through me. Thursday was my regular late day at work, something Vanessa could easily have learned simply by watching our driveway. Call my office, I said. His jaw tightened. I'm not interrogating your coworkers, but you're interrogating me. I'm asking questions. No, Ethan, you're repeating Vanessa's story and waiting for me to confess. Before he could answer, his phone lit up. Vanessa. He turned the screen over immediately. That single movement told me everything. How long has she been filling your head with this? He hesitated. A few days. You've spent days discussing my supposed affair with our neighbor? She was worried. She wants you. His chair scraped across the floor. Don't do that. Do what? Say what's obvious? You're blaming her because you don't want to answer me. I already did. He walked away, ending the conversation as though my innocence had become a subject he alone had the right to close. The next morning, Vanessa was collecting her mail when I left for work. Morning, Claire. I stopped. What did you tell my husband? She smiled faintly. You should ask him. I'm asking you. She took an unhurried sip from her travel mug. I saw something that concerned me. You saw a car. I saw more than that. Then tell me. You inserted yourself into my marriage. I was trying to protect Ethan. He doesn't need protection from me. Her expression softened into something that looked almost compassionate. That's what you believe. The answer was so calculated that it made my skin crawl. I stepped closer. Stay away from my husband. Vanessa did not move. You're angry, she said quietly. I understand why. You don't understand anything. I understand what it feels like to be caught. For one reckless second, I imagined knocking the mug from Vanessa's hand. Instead, I drove away. When I returned that evening, Ethan had moved into the guest room. The pillow from our bed and a folded blanket on the chair told me everything before he spoke. What are you doing? I need some space. Because Vanessa claims she saw a car? She has pictures. He opened a folder on his phone. The first photos showed a dark-haired woman meeting a man outside a cafe and standing beside a silver SUV identical to mine. Another captured her touching his arm. The final image caught her in profile. At first glance, she looked enough like me to fool anyone who wasn't paying attention. That isn't me, I said. She has your coat. Thousands of women own black coats. And your SUV? You can't even read the license plate. I studied the photo again. Look closer. Her face is different. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. That's your defense? No, it's an observable fact. He looked at me with quiet certainty. Vanessa said you'd focus on details like that. I froze. She warned you? She said you'd explain everything away. Everything suddenly made sense. Vanessa hadn't only manufactured evidence, she had prepared Ethan for every argument I would make, ensuring every denial sounded exactly like she predicted. Do you hear yourself? I asked. She showed you blurry photos, then convinced you not to believe me before I even saw them. She just knew you'd deny it. How could she know unless she planned this? He shook his head. You always twist things until everyone else sounds crazy. The words hurt more than the photographs. For 6 years, I believed Ethan knew the difference between explaining myself and manipulating him. Now, he was repeating Vanessa's language as though it were his own. Has she been coming here while I'm at work? She checks on me. You're a grown man. I'm going through something. Something she created. He turned toward the door. I can't talk to you when you're like this. When I'm pointing out that my husband trusts the woman stalking him more than his own wife, she isn't stalking me. I caught her watching our house. She said she was checking whether the side gate was open. I closed my eyes. Vanessa had anticipated everything. If I stayed calm, I was cold. If I became emotional, I was unstable. If I questioned the evidence, I was manipulative. There wasn't a single reaction she hadn't already rewritten for Ethan. Over the following week, he stopped sleeping beside me, avoided meals, and disappeared whenever I entered a room. Vanessa, meanwhile, became a constant presence. One afternoon, I came home to find them sitting together on the back steps, her hand resting lightly near his knee. "Get out of my yard." She stood immediately. "Claire, this isn't helping. You don't get to decide what helps inside my marriage." Ethan stepped between us. "Don't talk to her like that." I could barely believe what I was hearing. My husband was defending another woman in the backyard of my own home. Vanessa lowered her eyes and quietly walked away, brushing Ethan's arm before leaving. "Call me if you need anything." When the gate closed behind her, I turned back to him. "You let her touch you." She was trying to calm me down. "From what?" "From you." The answer landed harder than a shout. Then he showed me screenshots of text messages supposedly sent from my phone. "I miss Thursday nights. Tell me when he stops watching you." Another read. "You promised you were leaving him." Then, "Wear the black hoodie next time. I still have the picture from the parking lot." "These are fake." "Of course you'd say that." "They are. Vanessa said you would." I stared at him. "Where did she even get them?" "She received them from the man you're seeing." "And you believe that?" "He said he felt guilty." "Did you ever speak to him?" "He didn't want to call." "How convenient." Ethan's face hardened. "I'm done listening to you attack the only person who's been honest with me." That sentence changed everything. Until then, I believed he was frightened and confused. Instead, he was choosing Vanessa over me again and again, accepting every lie she gave him because it was easier than questioning the woman he'd decided to trust. 2 nights later, I woke just after midnight and found Ethan's side of the bed empty again. A moving light swept across the backyard. I looked out the window and saw Vanessa standing beside the fence, holding up her phone toward our house. The moment she noticed me, she lowered it, slipped into the darkness, and disappeared before I reached the back door. By the time I stepped outside, only the gate was still swaying in the wind. The next morning, I told Ethan what I'd seen. She was asleep. "How would you know?" "Because I was texting her." I stared at him. "You were texting Vanessa after midnight?" "She couldn't sleep." "And somehow that became your problem?" "She's been helping me." "No, she's been isolating you." Without another word, he grabbed his keys and walked out. That evening, he returned carrying my old black hoodie. "Where did you find that?" "In the garage." "I didn't leave it there." "Vanessa saw you wearing it Thursday night." "I was at work." "She says otherwise." He handed me another photograph. This one was far more convincing. A woman wearing my black hoodie and pale scarf stood beside a silver SUV identical to mine, kissing a man in a parking lot. For a split second, even I questioned what I was seeing. Then I noticed the mistakes. The reflection in the car window didn't match her pose. The shadows fell in different directions. A faint blur outlined her jaw. The image had been edited. "Ethan, look at the reflection." "Stop. The lighting doesn't even match." "Stop lying." I reached for the phone, but he pulled it away and stepped back. "Don't touch me." The fear in his voice was genuine. Vanessa hadn't only convinced him I was cheating. She had convinced him I was dangerous. At that exact moment, his phone lit up. "Vanessa, remember what I told you. She'll become aggressive when she realizes you know." He read the message. So did I. "She's controlling you." "No, she's protecting me." "From your own wife?" "From someone I clearly never knew." I looked at the man I'd loved for 6 years and realized nothing I said belonged to me anymore. Vanessa had already written every response he expected me to give. Then he pointed toward the front door. "I want you out." I packed one suitcase while Ethan watched from the hallway. Neither of us cried. The silence between us said more than either of us could. "Leave your house key." I looked at him. "The house belongs to me, Ethan. I'm leaving because I don't feel safe here tonight, not because you have the right to throw me out." I kept the key. "I'll come back with Rachel for the rest of my things." "You already had somewhere to go?" "My sister offered." He laughed bitterly. "That was fast." "You really think I planned this?" I don't know what to think anymore. The truth was that he had already decided what to believe. I left carrying one suitcase and my laptop bag. The front door closed behind me without another word. Rachel opened her apartment before I even reached the buzzer. I saw Ethan's post. She handed me her phone. "Sometimes the hardest betrayal comes from the person you trusted most. Please respect our privacy while we deal with this painful situation." He never mentioned my name. He didn't need to. Within an hour, screenshots had spread through our mutual friends. Some texted to ask if the rumors were true. Others quietly disappeared from my life altogether. Vanessa hadn't only isolated Ethan. She had isolated me too. The following Monday, I returned to work pretending everything was normal, but I couldn't focus on a single task. Around lunchtime, my coworker Melissa stopped by my desk. "Someone called reception asking whether you still work here." "Did they say who they were?" She shook her head. "They only wanted to know if you're usually in the office on Thursday evenings." My hands froze. Thursday. Again. The same day, Vanessa had repeated over and over. What did reception tell them? Nothing. HR took the call. I thanked Melissa, but my pulse wouldn't slow. Someone was checking my work schedule, and they wanted to know exactly when I wouldn't be home. That evening, I met with my attorney, Linda Morris. She listened quietly as I described everything. From Vanessa's arrival next door to the edited photographs Ethan believed without question. "I think someone is manipulating your husband," she said. "But suspicion isn't enough. We need evidence." "I don't even know where to start." with facts. She quickly outlined the obvious places to begin: property records, phone logs, security access, and the home's camera system. You still own the house, so Ethan had no legal authority to throw you out or demand your key. I'll notify him immediately that he can't change the locks, dispose of your belongings, or deny you access. She also insisted I never return alone, while Ethan remained angry and arranged for Rachel and a civil standby officer to accompany me if necessary. Then she asked a question that stopped me. Have you changed the password for your security cameras? I hadn't even thought about them. When we bought the house, we installed 8 exterior cameras connected to cloud storage, but we rarely checked them unless a package disappeared. Change every password tonight, Linda said. I did exactly that, removing Ethan's access and enabling 2-factor authentication before closing my laptop, never imagining that those cameras would become the key to everything. Meanwhile, mutual friends quietly told me Vanessa was practically living at the house. She brought groceries, cooked meals, rearranged furniture, and spent so much time there that neighbors assumed she'd already moved in. What hurt wasn't how quickly Ethan replaced me. It was how completely he believed she was helping him recover. About a week later, an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone. Normally, I ignored unknown callers, but this time I answered. Ms. Bennett, this is Daniel from SecureView Monitoring. We manage your home's cloud storage. My stomach tightened. Is something wrong? Our automated system flagged repeated motion events behind your property. Because your account credentials were recently changed, the archive was placed on hold instead of being deleted. What kind of motion? A technician reviewed only the motion thumbnails and timestamps. The same individual appears repeatedly over several weeks. We recommend you review the archive clips before they're removed. A download link arrived while we were still speaking. For several minutes, I stared at the email, unsure whether I wanted to see my home again. Eventually, curiosity overcame fear. The first recording showed Vanessa climbing our back fence 3 weeks before Ethan threw me out. Every clip followed the same pattern until one showed her crouching beneath the dining room window, silently watching our home. Another captured her pressing her fingertips against the kitchen glass. By then, I no longer needed a clearer camera angle. She hadn't been guessing about our lives. She'd been watching us. Only then did I understand how she always seemed to know our conversations, schedules, and routines. Nothing she'd told Ethan had come from instinct. I called Linda immediately. I found something. What happened? The security cameras. A brief silence followed. What did you find? Vanessa, she's been spying on us. When Linda spoke again, her voice was calm but urgent. Don't contact Ethan. Don't contact Vanessa. Copy every recording before you do anything else. You think this is enough? I think we just found where all of this began. For the next 4 hours, I downloaded every archived motion clip from the previous 3 months. A clear pattern emerged. Almost every visit happened after midnight. Vanessa always entered through the same blind spot behind 2 cedar trees, climbed the rear fence, and went straight to our windows. Sometimes she photographed the house. Sometimes she simply stood there watching for several minutes before leaving. Then I reached a recording from 4 days before Ethan accused me. My heart stopped as she crouched beside my SUV and attached a small GPS tracker beneath the frame before calmly climbing back over the fence. I stared at the frozen frame, finally understanding the truth. She hadn't started with the fake photographs. Those photographs were the final step in a plan she'd been building for months. I didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, every video existed in 3 places, 2 encrypted backups, and a complete copy in Linda's possession. She called before 8. Have you watched everything? Almost. Stop watching alone. I'm contacting the police. 2 detectives met us at Linda's office later that morning. Detective Sarah Collins asked questions while Detective Miguel Reyes reviewed the recordings without saying a word. When the footage of Vanessa placing the device beneath my SUV ended, Reyes replayed it once more. Do you still have the vehicle? Yes, it's at my sister's garage. Don't touch it. He turned to Collins. If that device is still there, we'll request a warrant to examine the vehicle. If it's a tracker, we'll use that evidence to seek a second warrant for Vanessa's property. For the first time in weeks, someone else saw exactly what I saw. This was no longer a marriage falling apart. It was a criminal investigation. That afternoon, forensic technicians searched my SUV. Hidden beneath the driver's side frame was a GPS tracker secured with industrial magnets, complete with its own battery, SIM card, and transmission history. The technician photographed it, removed it carefully, and sealed it into an evidence bag. Detective Collins looked at me. Whoever installed this wanted to know everywhere you went. At that moment, everything fell into place. Vanessa had never guessed my schedule. She had been tracking it. The GPS device transformed the case overnight. What had begun as suspected harassment now included clear evidence of illegal surveillance, and by late afternoon, a judge approved a search warrant for Vanessa's home. Before officers entered the property, Collins called. We'll update you as soon as we know more. Waiting was almost unbearable. Rachel tried distracting me with movies, but neither of us watched them. Around 9:30, Linda finally called. They found a lot. How much is a lot? She paused. Claire, prepare yourself. The following morning, Collins met Linda and me at the police department with a thick evidence binder waiting on the conference table. This is only the preliminary inventory. The first photographs showed Vanessa's home office. One wall had been turned into a map of my life. Colored pins marked my office, gym, grocery store, Rachel's apartment, even my favorite coffee shop. Strings connected every location like an investigation board. Except I wasn't the investigator. I was the target. The next section contained hundreds of surveillance photographs. Some were taken in public, others through restaurant windows, office entrances, and parking lots without my knowledge. Nearly every image included handwritten notes recording where I went, when I arrived, how long I stayed, and whether I was alone. She hadn't been watching me for weeks. She had been documenting my life for months. Then Collins opened another folder. This is where the investigation changed. Inside were hundreds of manipulated photographs. Every fake image Ethan had believed was there. Fabricated dates, embraces, dinners, hotel meetings, all assembled from real photographs Vanessa had taken herself or stolen from social media. The digital forensic team recovered the editing files from her computer. Each image contained a complete history, showing how it had been built, from the original photograph through background replacements, shadow corrections, reflection edits, and the final exported version. There was no longer any doubt. Every piece of evidence against me had been manufactured inside Vanessa's home office. Collins handed me another envelope. These involve your husband. Inside were the text messages Ethan had shown me. This time the investigators had traced them. Every conversation originated from internet-based virtual numbers, generated through software recovered from Vanessa's computer. They even found multiple draft versions where she experimented with different wording before sending the final messages. One note read, "Don't make the messages too emotional. He believes facts more than feelings." Another simply said, "Introduce suspicion slowly, never all at once." My hands began shaking. None of this had been spontaneous. Vanessa had planned every reaction long before Ethan ever confronted me. Finally, Detective Reyes slid one last folder across the table. "I think you should read this yourself." Inside the leather-bound journal recovered from Vanessa's bedroom, I found no diary. I closed the journal. I had seen enough. Vanessa had never wanted to ruin my marriage. She wanted to replace me, and everything in that room proved how patiently she had planned it. For several seconds, no one in the room spoke. Detective Collins asked me one final question. Did Ethan ever receive anonymous warnings before Vanessa spoke to him? I remembered an unsigned note left beneath our windshield months earlier. Some people aren't who they pretend to be. We had laughed and thrown it away. Collins nodded. We found matching paper in Vanessa's printer. Even Ethan's first doubt had started with her. By the end of the briefing, nearly 6 months of manipulation had been reconstructed. Every rumor, photograph, and coincidence traced back to the same person. That afternoon, officers arrested Vanessa outside her house. The neighbors who had once watched Ethan throw my belongings onto the lawn now watched Vanessa leave in handcuffs. None of it mattered as much as the call I received before sunset. "It was Ethan. The police came," he said quietly. "I know. They showed me everything. The computer, the tracker, the fake messages." For weeks I had imagined hearing those words. Instead of relief, I felt only exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I believed her. "I know. I destroyed everything." I looked out Rachel's apartment window before answering. "No, you destroyed our marriage the day you stopped believing your wife." He broke down. "I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." "You don't spend weeks choosing someone else by accident, Ethan." A long silence followed. Finally, I said, "I'll meet you tomorrow." "Where?" "The cafe on 5th Street. After the call ended, Rachel brought me a cup of tea. "He finally knows the truth?" she asked. "Yes." "And?" I closed the evidence binder. The truth doesn't repair the damage people choose not to see. By then, Linda had already prepared something else. Divorce papers. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early, wanting a few quiet minutes before facing the man who had traded 6 years of marriage for a stranger's lies. Before I left Linda's office, she handed me a large envelope. "You don't have to give these to him today." "I know. You can still wait. I've already waited long enough." Inside were divorce papers with every signature completed except Ethan's. At exactly 10 o'clock, he walked into the cafe looking thinner, exhausted, and years older than I remembered. "You came." I said I would. He sat across from me, leaving both cups of coffee untouched. "I've replayed everything," he said quietly. "Every conversation. Every time you told me Vanessa was lying." "And you?" He lowered his eyes. "I thought I was protecting myself." "You weren't protecting yourself, Ethan. You were protecting the person destroying our marriage." He nodded without arguing. After a long silence, he said, "I apologize to your sister and your parents." They didn't answer. "No. They grew up with me. They believed you." His eyes filled with tears. "I never actually told them you cheated. You didn't have to." I reminded him of the vague post he'd shared online. It never mentioned my name, but everyone understood exactly who he meant. I deleted it. After thousands of people had already seen it, I wasn't thinking. "No," I said, "you weren't." He reached into his jacket and carefully placed my wedding ring on the table. "I found it in our bedroom." I looked at it without touching it. "I stopped wearing that ring the day you chose to believe Vanessa." His hand tightened around the edge of the table. "I understand." "You don't." He fell silent. The detective showed me everything, he continued after a moment. The tracker, the fake messages, the editing software. I even watched the surveillance videos. So did I. I saw her climbing over the fence. I saw her planting the tracker. His voice dropped. I don't know how I missed all of it. Because she never asked you to trust her, I said quietly. She only asked you to stop trusting me. He stared at me. I've thought about the night you told me to call your office. You refused. I never wanted proof. That confession hurt more than anything else. He hadn't been searching for the truth. He'd been protecting the story he'd already decided to believe. Eventually, he said, believing Vanessa became easier than admitting I'd been manipulated. I appreciated the honesty. It changed nothing. I moved out yesterday, he added, after Linda's notice. You should have understood long before you threw me out of a house that was never yours. He nodded. I left my key with Rachel. I won't come back unless you ask me to. Then he looked down at his hands. I keep remembering everything I said to you. The kitchen, the driveway, the bedroom. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself. I believed him. His regret was genuine. It had simply arrived too late. The waitress quietly refilled our coffee before walking away. Only then did Ethan ask the question both of us had been avoiding. Can we fix this? I looked at him for a long moment. When Vanessa first moved next door, I trusted both of you. Then I trusted only you. In the end, I begged you to trust me. He closed his eyes. You chose her every time. I did. You believed every rumor, defended every lie, dismissed every warning I gave you. When I asked you to verify my schedule, you refused. When I showed you the flaws in the photographs, you ignored them. And when I told you she was manipulating you, I said you were the manipulative one. His voice was barely audible. Each admission felt like another piece of our marriage settling permanently into place. At last, I rested my hand on the envelope beside my coffee. I brought something too. His eyes followed it as I slid the envelope across the table. Open it. His hands trembled as he pulled out the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The color drained from his face. No. The word escaped before he could stop it. Please, I know I don't deserve another chance, but let me earn one. You already had thousands. He looked at me in disbelief. 6 years of chances, Ethan. Tears filled his eyes. Wasn't I enough? He immediately shook his head. No, that's not what I meant. I know, I said quietly. This was never about whether I was enough. It was about whether you respected me enough to hear my side before deciding I was guilty. He lowered his head. He already knew the answer. A moment later, he reached across the table for my hand. Without thinking, I pulled mine away. It was a small movement, but it said everything. His hand slowly fell back to the table. I understand. I think you finally do. Around us, the cafe carried on, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. People laughed, dishes clinked, and somewhere across the room a family celebrated a birthday. Only our lives had stopped. After a long silence, Ethan spoke again. I started therapy. That surprised me. When? The day after the detectives came. He managed a tired smile. My therapist asked why I trusted Vanessa more than my own wife. He looked down. I still don't know how to answer. I believed him. Some answers arrive only after they've stopped mattering. When I stood to leave, Ethan rose with me. Claire, I turned. If you ever find a way to forgive me. I considered his words carefully. I hope one day I won't carry this anger. Hope briefly returned to his face. Then I finished. But forgiveness isn't the same as rebuilding trust. The hope disappeared. I picked up my purse while he remained standing beside the table, divorce papers still in his hands. Before walking away, I looked at him one last time. You keep saying Vanessa destroyed our marriage. He nodded. I shook my head. She found the crack. His eyes stayed on mine. You opened the door. I walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard only the quiet rustle of legal papers unfolding across the table. Outside, my phone vibrated. A text from Detective Collins. Vanessa has agreed to give a statement. You should hear what she confessed. I read it twice before replying. I'm available whenever you need me. Her response came almost immediately. Police Department, 2 o'clock. During the drive, I kept wondering why Vanessa had suddenly decided to talk. The surveillance videos, GPS tracker, forged photographs, fake messages, and journal had already destroyed any believable defense she might have offered. I thought the investigation had answered every question. I was wrong. Detective Collins met Linda and me in a private interview room. A digital recorder sat waiting on the table. Without a word, Collins pressed play. Vanessa's recorded interview filled the room. She hadn't confessed or accepted a plea deal, but for the first time she explained calmly and without emotion why she had done everything. I never hated Claire. I admired her. She had everything I wanted. A chill ran through me. I didn't want to ruin her life, she continued. I wanted to replace her. Linda quietly closed her notebook. Neither of us spoke. Vanessa admitted she had started watching us only weeks after moving into the neighborhood. Ethan's kindness caught her attention immediately. He listened, remembered small things, and believed people more easily than he questioned them. Then came the sentence that explained everything. I knew he'd trust the person who looked least interested in influencing him. She had never demanded Ethan's trust. She earned it, one carefully planned conversation at a time. When detectives asked why she chose us, her answer was immediate. Claire loved him completely. People who trust each other that much never expect the danger to come from outside the marriage. To Vanessa, our relationship had never been personal. It had simply been vulnerable. She then described how she built the fake evidence. For months, she studied photo editing software, photographed women with similar builds, rented vehicles matching mine, recreated familiar locations, and even bought a coat nearly identical to my black hoodie. Nothing had been accidental. Every image was designed to survive a quick glance, not careful examination, because she never expected Ethan to investigate. She expected him to react emotionally, and he did. The final question was the hardest to hear. What did you think would happen after Ethan forced Claire out? Vanessa answered without hesitation. I would have waited. People grieving betrayal need someone stable. I already was. Eventually I'd move in, help him heal, and he'd realize I'd loved him all along. She believed every word. Her entire plan rested on one impossible belief: that love could be created by isolating someone from the person they trusted most. When the recording ended, Detective Collins closed the file. She's facing multiple felony charges, and the digital evidence is overwhelming. For the first time, I realized this story would not end with rumors. It would end in court. 3 months later, the criminal case began. With the forensic evidence already secured, the prosecution moved quickly. Investigators had also connected Vanessa to similar behavior in another state years earlier. Although those allegations had never resulted in convictions, the pattern was impossible to ignore. This time the evidence spoke for itself. The surveillance videos, GPS tracker, edited image files, journal, software, and virtual phone records all pointed to the same conclusion. Vanessa eventually pleaded guilty to several felony charges in exchange for lesser counts being dismissed. The judge sentenced her to prison, followed by years of supervised probation and permanent no-contact orders protecting both Ethan and me. When the sentence was read, she never looked at me. She looked only at Ethan. He never looked back. Several weeks later, nearly 6 months after I filed, our divorce became final. The hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. Because the house had belonged to me before our marriage, ownership never changed. There were no children or complicated property disputes, only signatures that reduced 6 years together to a few pages of legal language. When the judge asked whether the marriage had broken down beyond repair, we both answered the same way: yes. Neither of us stopped for the reporters waiting outside. To everyone else, this was the story of an obsessive neighbor. To me, it had always been a story about trust. Vanessa committed the crimes, but she couldn't have rewritten my marriage without someone willing to believe her over the woman he had promised to trust. Life afterward became quieter than I expected. I renovated the house room by room. The guest bedroom became my office. The kitchen, where Ethan had accused me, was rebuilt with brighter cabinets and wider windows, and the shattered wedding photograph was replaced with a landscape from one of my grandmother's favorite hiking trails. The house no longer looked the same. Neither did I. Months passed. Work became busy again. I accepted projects I'd once turned down, traveled more, and slowly stopped waking at every unfamiliar sound. One Saturday morning, I stood beside the rosebush where my dresses had caught the day. Ethan threw me out. New flowers had bloomed where my dresses once lay, tangled in the branches. About 8 months after the divorce, a letter arrived from Ethan. His therapist had encouraged him to write it, only after accepting that I owed him neither forgiveness nor a reply. Claire, I spent months believing I lost you because of Vanessa. Therapy forced me to admit something much harder. I lost you because every time you asked me to trust my wife instead of the neighbor I barely knew, I chose the easier story. I confused suspicion with caution. I confused fear with evidence. By the time I finally wanted the truth, I had already destroyed the only person trying to give it to me. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope I never become that version of myself again. Ethan. I folded the letter and placed it inside a small wooden box with my wedding ring. Not because I wanted to revisit the past, because some chapters deserve to be remembered exactly as they happened. Over the years, people have occasionally asked whether I hate Vanessa. I always give the same answer. I don't. Hatred would mean giving her space in my life she no longer deserves. Do I pity her? Sometimes. She sacrificed her own freedom, chasing a life that was never hers. As for Ethan, I no longer carry anger either. Only a quiet sadness for what we might have become if, before believing a stranger, he had asked me one simple question. Can you help me understand? Looking back, I don't think our marriage ended the day Ethan believed Vanessa. It ended the day he stopped believing me. The afternoon he threw my belongings across the driveway, I thought I'd lost everything. I lost a marriage, but I found something far more valuable. The certainty that I would never again stay where my voice mattered less than someone else's lies.